Marion Stedman's hands trembled as she slid the denial letter back into its envelope. 23 hours after her husband had hand-delivered their request to the HOA office. 23 hours for Phyllis Kemper to reject what 3 doctors had recommended. A small therapy dog to help Marion remember why mornings mattered. In their spotless condo at Whispering Pines, surrounded by boxes their daughter wouldn't collect and grandchildren's artwork they'd never see updated, Marion and Frank had learned to make themselves smaller, quieter, less trouble. Their son David had been dead 3 years. His widow took the grandchildren and disappeared. Their daughter Stephanie called from Singapore less and less, her voice bright with distance and career updates that required no response. Frank's Parkinson's meant he could barely open his own medication bottles. Marion's anxiety had progressed from manageable to medicinal, to something that kept her inside, watching the artificial lake through windows she no longer opened. They were disappearing in plain sight, and they knew it. Then Devin Torres, 34 and grieving his own losses, showed up to replace an air filter and refused to pretend he didn't see the crisis unfolding in their pristine kitchen. He didn't call authorities. He didn't offer pity. He brought breakfast burritos the next morning and stayed. And when Marion whispered that a small dog, something to care for again, might give her a reason to open those curtains, Devin didn't accept the HOA won't allow it as the end of that conversation. He went looking for fine print. Have you ever discovered that the rule keeping you trapped was never actually legal? Stay with us to witness what happened when one maintenance worker, 2 abandoned parents, and a community of forgotten neighbors learned that dignity isn't granted by permission. It's reclaimed by reading the law aloud, with tremoring hands in a room that underestimated them. Marion Stedman's fingers traced the edge of the photograph. David at 12, gap-toothed and holding his first-place science fair ribbon. The image lived in a box marked David's Room in blue Sharpie, her handwriting from 3 years ago when they'd moved to Whispering Pines. When they'd believed downsizing meant simplifying, not shrinking. The box sat with 4 others in the guest bedroom, stacked against the wall like an exhibit of abandoned things. Stephanie's college textbooks, David's military medals, crayon drawings from grandchildren whose faces Marion could barely recall now. Jennifer had been thorough when she'd cut contact, deleting Marion from every shared photo account, blocking her number, erasing them as efficiently as clearing browser history. They're not coming for these. Frank's voice carried from the kitchen, matter-of-fact in that way he'd developed since the Parkinson's diagnosis. Not cruel, just empirical. Marion knew he was right. 6 months since Stephanie's last call from Singapore. The conversation had lasted 4 minutes. Stephanie's voice bright and distant, apologizing for the time difference, promising to call again soon. She hadn't. Marion closed the box flap and returned to the living room, where Frank sat at their small dining table, staring at his morning medications. 7 pill bottles arranged in a semicircle. His right hand hovered over the largest, the Parkinson's prescription in its mocking child-proof container. She watched him try, watched his fingers, which had once rebuilt carburetors and tied fishing knots and held her steady through David's funeral, fail to grip. The tremor was worse today. It was always worse when he was frustrated. "Let me," Marion began. "I can do it." His jaw set. He tried again, plastic cap against palm, pushing and twisting. Nothing. The bottle slipped, skittered across the table. Neither of them reached for it. The silence in their condo was a physical thing. Beyond the sliding glass door, the artificial lake reflected morning sun, a perfect simulation of peace. Other residents walked the manufactured shoreline, slow, careful loops that killed time until dinner, until bed, until another morning of the same loop. Marion's own medication bottles sat on the kitchen counter. Xanax, Lexapro. Prescribed after David died, increased after Jennifer disappeared with the grandchildren, adjusted again after Stephanie's calls became monthly, then quarterly, then theoretical. The pills helped. They made the anxiety manageable, turned the panic from drowning to treading water. But they didn't make her want to open the curtains, didn't make breakfast seem worth preparing, didn't fill the silence with anything but the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of Frank's watch. Frank picked up the bottle again. This time he didn't even try the cap. He fit the edge between his molars and bit down, twisting with his jaw until the cap popped off. Pills scattered across the table. He selected 2, swallowed them dry, and carefully replaced the others. Marion felt something crack in her chest. Not her heart breaking. That had happened already, multiple times, until the pieces were too small to break further. This was different. This was recognition. They were disappearing, not dying. That would be simple, definable, something that required paperwork and notification. They were evaporating in plain sight, becoming less substantial each day. The boxes in the guest room were proof. Physical evidence that their children had decided Marion and Frank were places you moved away from, not toward. And if their own children had made that calculation, why would anyone else notice when they finally faded completely? Frank met her eyes across the table. In his expression, Marion saw the same recognition, the same quiet terror. Neither of them said it aloud. They didn't need to. The knock came at 9 a.m., expected and routine. Marion had forgotten about it until the sound pulled her from the kitchen table, where she'd been sitting for the past hour, mad-sour, staring at a mug of tea gone cold. "Maintenance," a voice called. "Here for the HVAC filter?" Frank was in the bathroom. Marion heard water running, heard the small sounds of struggle that accompanied every shower now. She stood, smoothed her cardigan, and opened the door. The man on her threshold was younger than expected, mid-30s perhaps, wearing a Whispering Pines polo shirt and carrying a toolbox. His name tag read Devin. He smiled politely, the professional expression of someone accustomed to entering strangers' homes. "Morning, Mrs. Stedman. Just need to swap your air filter. Shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. Marion stepped aside. "Of course. It's in the hallway closet." She meant to return to the kitchen, to her cold tea and the careful blankness she'd been practicing. Instead, she found herself standing motionless in the living room, while this stranger, Devin, opened their hallway closet and retrieved his stepladder. Something was wrong with her face. She felt it before she understood it. Warmth on her cheeks, salt taste at the corner of her mouth. She was crying, not sobbing, just leaking. Tears arriving without permission or sound, tracking down her face while she stood frozen, mortified, unable to stop them or explain them or hide. Devin glanced over from his ladder. His expression shifted. Not alarm exactly, but attention. Real attention, the kind that actually sees. "Mrs. Stedman, you okay?" "Fine." The word came automatically. "I'm fine." From the bathroom came a thud, then Frank's voice, tight with frustration. "Damn it!" Devin descended the ladder in 2 steps. "That your husband?" Marion nodded, unable to form words. "May I?" She nodded again. Watched this stranger walk to her bathroom door and knock. "Mr. Stedman? It's Devin from maintenance. Need any help in there?" The silence stretched. Then, "Can't get the damn soap." Devin looked at Marion. "Ma'am, I'm an EMT. Was anyway." "Okay if I help him out." Marion's throat closed. she managed a third nod. What happened next should have been humiliating. This young man, this stranger, entering their bathroom, helping Frank, dignified, private Frank, out of the shower, wrapping him in a towel, supporting his weight while retrieving clean clothes, speaking in a calm, matter-of-fact voice about grip bars and shower chairs, about occupational therapy and veterans' resources, about things Marion should have researched months ago but couldn't, because researching meant acknowledging, and acknowledging meant accepting, and accepting felt like surrender. 15 minutes later, Frank sat at the dining table, dressed and steady. Devin had returned to his ladder, was finishing the filter replacement. Neither man acknowledged what had happened. Neither needed to. At the door, toolbox in hand, Devin paused. "You folks eat breakfast?" Marion's voice emerged threadbare. "We manage." His eyes traveled to the counter, to the medication bottles, to the untouched groceries from last week's delivery. He didn't argue, didn't offer pity, just nodded and left. The next morning, at 8 a.m., someone knocked. Marion found Devin on her doorstep, holding a brown paper bag that smelled like eggs and salsa and something warm. "Breakfast burritos," he said. "Food truck on Commercial Boulevard makes them perfect. Figured you might want one." He didn't wait for permission, just walked in like he'd been invited, set the bag on their table, and started looking for plates. By day 3, Marion had stopped apologizing when Devin knocked at 8 a.m. By day 5, she'd started setting out 3 coffee mugs before he arrived. By day 8, she'd begun to believe he might actually keep coming back. The routine took shape without discussion. Devin would arrive before his maintenance shift, help Frank shower on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, organize their medications into the daily planner he'd brought from CVS. He'd stay for coffee, reading the newspaper while Frank worked his crossword puzzle and Marion pretended to eat toast. He never asked about their children, never commented on the boxes in the guest room or the phone that never rang, never treated their silence as something requiring explanation. On the 8th morning, Devin found Marion at the dining table, surrounded by photo albums she'd been avoiding for months. The kind of albums people used to make before everything went digital. Actual photographs in plastic sleeves, handwritten dates in the margins. "Frank mentioned you liked organizing things," Devin said, refilling her coffee without asking. "Thought maybe sorting these would be easier with company." Marion's hands trembled as she turned a page. David at his high school graduation, Stephanie's wedding, Frank coaching Little League in their old backyard, a life that felt like it had belonged to different people. Then a photograph that made her fingers still completely. Sunny, their golden retriever, sprawled across their old living room floor, David's head pillowed on his flank. The dog had died 5 years ago, 6 months before Frank's diagnosis, back when they'd still lived in the house with the yard and the neighbors who knew their names. Marion traced the image with one fingertip. "I think I'd be okay if I had something to take care of again," she whispered. Not to Devin specifically, just aloud, testing the words. "Something small. Something that needed me." Frank's newspaper rustled. He looked up from his crossword, studying his wife's face with an intensity that made Devin glance away, granting them privacy in their shared gaze. "You ever think about getting another dog?" Devin asked carefully. Marion's expression shuddered so quickly it was like watching a door slam. "Whispering Pines doesn't allow animals. Phyllis Kemper made that very clear when we moved in. No pets, no exceptions." She closed the album with finality. "It's in all the paperwork." "Phyllis Kemper," Devin repeated, committing the name to memory. "HOA president." Frank's voice carried an edge Devin hadn't heard before. 15 years running, unopposed. "She's very..." Marion searched for the word. Particular. About the rules. Devin thought about Miguel's oncologist, who'd been very particular about which treatments insurance would cover. About the hospital billing department, very particular about payment schedules. About the hospice care coordinator, very particular about what constituted comfort measures only. He'd learned something during those 2 years of fighting for his husband. The people most particular about rules were often the ones who'd never actually read the laws behind them. The no pets thing, Devin said, keeping his tone casual. That's in the HOA governing documents? The resident handbook. Marion's voice was small. Page 3. Huh. Devin finished his coffee. Mind if I take a look at those documents sometime? I'm curious about the maintenance clauses. Want to make sure I'm following protocol. It wasn't quite a lie. He did want to read the documents, just not the sections about HVAC filters. Frank met his eyes across the table. Something passed between them. Not quite hope, but perhaps hope's careful cousin. The willingness to imagine possibility. Office is open until 4, Frank said. Donna at the front desk can make you copies. Devin stood, collecting the mugs. I'll stop by during lunch. After he left, Marion opened the photo album again, stared at Sonny's golden face, at David's peaceful expression, at the evidence of a time when her hands hadn't shaken and her chest hadn't felt like it was collapsing inward. Don't, she whispered. To Frank, to herself, to Hope. Frank returned to his crossword without answering. The Whispering Pines management office occupied a converted first-floor condo with fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly ill. Donna Mitchell, the HOA assistant, smiled professionally from behind a desk organized with the precision of someone who understood that disorder invited questions. Help you? She was maybe 45, efficient-looking. The kind of person who kept systems running through sheer force of administrative competence. Devin Torres, maintenance, hoping to grab a copy of the governing documents? Want to make sure I'm following protocol on resident access? Donna's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes. She pulled a 3-ring binder from the shelf behind her. Here's the handbook. Governing documents are public record. I can make copies if you need the full incorporation papers. Just the handbook's fine for now. Devin accepted the binder. This what residents get when they move in? Updated annually? Donna's tone was carefully neutral. Ms. Kemper is very thorough about rule compliance. Devin found page 3 without difficulty. Community standards and restrictions in bold type, followed by 17 numbered items. Number 14. No pets, animals, or livestock of any kind shall be kept, housed, or maintained on property. Simple, absolute, unambiguous. Also, Devin suspected, legally unenforceable. He'd spent 2 years learning to read insurance contracts, treatment authorization forms, hospice eligibility criteria. He'd learned that the most absolute-sounding language often contained the biggest loopholes, because absolutism was expensive to defend. Mind if I ask how long this rule's been in place? Donna's professional mask cracked slightly. Since Ms. Kemper became president, 15 years. A pause. There was an incident with a dog before her time, but she has strong feelings about animal safety. Makes sense. Devin kept his voice sympathetic. Must be tough, enforcing something people don't always agree with. Donna's fingers tightened on her pen. It's my job. The words carried weight that had nothing to do with administrative duty. After Devin left, he drove directly to the county clerk's office, where public records lived in filing cabinets and microfiche and, occasionally, scanned PDFs that loaded with painful slowness. Whispering Pines' original incorporation documents dated to 1985. 3 years before the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988, which had established that reasonable accommodations for disabilities, including emotional support and service animals, superseded local housing restrictions. The Condo Association's bylaws had never been updated to reflect federal law. Phyllis Kemper had spent 15 years enforcing a rule that contradicted federal accommodation requirements, betting on residents being too old, too tired, too isolated, or too intimidated to challenge her. It was a bet that had paid off, repeatedly, until now. Devin made copies of everything: the original incorporation documents, the Fair Housing Act sections, HUD's guidance on reasonable accommodations for assistance animals. He highlighted relevant passages, added sticky notes with citations. Then he stopped at the library and printed 20 pages of case law. HOAs that had lost accommodation disputes, penalties assessed, legal fees awarded to plaintiffs. By the time his shift ended at 4 p.m., he had a file folder thick enough to qualify as evidence and thin enough to fit in his backpack. He drove back to the Stedman's condo, knocked twice, and waited. Frank opened the door. Marion sat in her recliner, Biscuit's photograph, no, Sonny's photograph, resting on her lap. "Found something interesting," Devin said. "Want to talk about what you actually want?" Frank answered the door before Devin finished knocking. Marion sat in her recliner, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a verdict. Devin set his backpack on the dining table and pulled out the folder. Thick enough to mean business, organized enough to show respect. "I found something interesting about your HOA rules. Want to see?" Marion's voice emerged thin as tissue paper. "Devin, well, appreciate everything you've done, but just look first." He spread the documents across the table. Federal guidelines, HUD regulations, case law citations with the relevant passages highlighted. Whispering Pines governing documents are from 1985. The Fair Housing Act was amended in 1988 to require reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities. That includes emotional support animals and service animals. Frank moved to the table, his gait careful but deliberate. He picked up the top page, the original HOA incorporation papers, and read silently. His insurance adjuster training kicked in automatically, scanning for discrepancies, identifying gaps between what was written and what was enforceable. "The handbook Phyllis gave us," Frank said slowly, "isn't legally binding if it contradicts federal law." "Correct." Devin pulled out another document. "HUD has clear guidelines. If you have documented disabilities, and you do, the HOA has to consider reasonable accommodations. A therapy animal isn't a pet. It's medical equipment, like your walker or Marion's anxiety medication." Marion's breathing had gone shallow. "But Phyllis said, Phyllis has been counting on people not knowing their rights." Devin kept his voice even, matter of fact. Not angry, just factual. "I'm not saying it'll be easy. I'm saying it's possible, but first," he looked at Marion directly. "What do you actually want?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marion's hands trembled in her lap. "I want..." Her voice cracked. She tried again. "I want something to take care of. Something small. Something that needs me." The words came faster, like a dam breaking. "I want to feel like I matter to something that won't leave. I want Frank to see me as strong again instead of broken. I want to wake up and have a reason to get out of bed besides just surviving another day." Frank reached for her hand. His tremored. Hers shook. Together, they were steadier. "Then let's do it," Frank said. Over the next 3 days, they became strategists. Marion called her psychiatrist Dr. Susan Chen, who'd been treating her anxiety for 2 years. Dr. Chen listened to Marion explain the situation, then spent an hour crafting a detailed letter documenting Marion's clinical anxiety disorder, her social isolation, and her psychiatrist's professional opinion that a therapy animal would provide significant therapeutic benefit. Frank contacted his neurologist, Dr. Patel, who'd been tracking his Parkinson's progression. Dr. Patel provided medical records showing the correlation between Frank's declining mobility, increased social isolation, and worsening depressive symptoms. He noted that companion animals had documented benefits for Parkinson's patients, including increased physical activity and improved emotional regulation. Devin helped them draft the formal accommodation request. Marion's organizational skills, dormant for years, surfaced like muscle memory. She formatted the documents, created a cover letter citing specific federal statutes, assembled supporting documentation in logical order. On Friday afternoon, Frank put on his best shirt, the one he'd worn to David's funeral, and walked to the HOA office. Marion stayed home. She couldn't handle watching Phyllis's face, but she could handle this. Waiting, hoping, choosing to try. Phyllis Kemper sat at her desk when Frank entered. She read the accommodation request while he stood there, each page turned with deliberate slowness. Her expression never changed. Professional distance maintained like armor. When she finished, she placed the papers in a manila folder and looked at Frank with the same tone she might use to discuss garbage collection schedules. Accommodation requests take 4 to 6 weeks to process. The board will review and respond in writing. Frank nodded once. "We'll wait for your response." He walked home through the manufactured perfection of Whispering Pines, past identical buildings and manicured lawns, knowing they'd just lit a fuse on something that couldn't be unlit. Marion met him at the door. "What did she say?" 4 to 6 weeks. They both knew it wouldn't take that long. Phyllis Kemper didn't tolerate challenges to her authority. They were right. It took 23 hours. Marion found the envelope at 9 a.m. Saturday, slipped under their door like a verdict delivered by executioner. The HOA logo in the corner, her name typed with administrative precision. She held it without opening, hands trembling worse than usual. Frank emerged from the bedroom, fully dressed despite the early hour. He'd been awake since 5, waiting. "Open it," he said. The letter was single-page, professionally formatted. Marion's eyes skimmed past the salutations, the reference numbers, landing on the operative paragraph. "Your request for reasonable accommodation has been carefully reviewed by the Board of Directors. After thorough consideration, your request is hereby denied." 23 hours. They'd filed Friday at 2 p.m. Phyllis hadn't even pretended to deliberate. The justifications followed in bullet points. Community standards, property values, precedent concerns, resident safety. Not one sentence acknowledged Marion's psychiatrist's letter or Frank's medical documentation. The words anxiety disorder and Parkinson's disease appeared nowhere in the response. Marion sank into her recliner, the letter falling from her fingers. 3 years of therapy, of medication adjustments, of learning to exist in the smaller and smaller space her fear allowed. And she'd believed, for 3 days, that something might change. Frank picked up the letter, read it twice, then reached for his phone. Devin arrived within 20 minutes, still in yesterday's clothes, looking like he'd driven straight from wherever he'd spent Friday night. He read the denial standing in their kitchen, expression shifting from neutral to something harder. "I've seen this before," he said quietly. When Miguel's oncologist recommended home hospice, the insurance company denied it in 18 hours. Same language. Careful review, thorough consideration. All bullshit. He looked at Marion. You okay?" She wasn't, but she nodded anyway, the reflex of someone who'd spent decades managing everyone else's comfort. "We file a HUD complaint," Devin continued. "Housing and Urban Development handles Fair Housing Act violations. They investigate discrimination based on disability." Marion's voice emerged small. "She'll retaliate?" "Probably." Devin didn't sugarcoat it. "But what's the worst she can do?" Frank spoke from the doorway, his tone empirical rather than bitter. "We're already isolated, already abandoned, already disappearing. Hard to threaten people who've lost everything that matters." Devin spread documents across their dining table. HUD complaint forms, filing instructions, relevant statutes. "There's something else. I found records of 7 previous accommodation requests Phyllis denied. 7 residents who needed help and got nothing. That's a pattern?" Marion looked at the forms, at Devin's careful annotations, at Frank's hands resting steady on the table edge. 7 people suffered alone, Frank said, because no one challenged her. By Sunday evening, they'd completed the complaint, each section documented with medical records and correspondence. Devin made 3 copies, one for HUD, one for their records, one for what came next. "I know where 2 of those denied residents live," Devin said, gathering the papers. "Clara Vasquez in Building C, Robert Nguyen in Building A." Marion felt something shift in her chest. Not hope exactly, but perhaps hope's careful cousin. The recognition that they weren't fighting alone. Monday morning, Devin knocked on Clara Vasquez's door with a maintenance work order and a question that had nothing to do with plumbing. Clara answered in a house dress and slippers, 82 years old and sharp as cut glass. Her condo smelled like café con leche and loneliness. "Mrs. Vasquez, I'm here about your kitchen faucet, but I also wanted to ask about your cat." Her expression shifted instantly. Grief, then anger, then something like recognition. "Who told you about Dulce?" "HOA records. You filed an accommodation request 3 years ago. Phyllis denied it." Clara's hands clenched. "My daughter took him. Said it was temporary to ease my transition to Whispering Pines. That was 3 years ago. I haven't seen him since." Her voice hardened. "Phyllis told my daughter animals weren't allowed. My daughter believed her. Or pretended to." Devin explained the Fair Housing Act, the federal protections Phyllis had ignored, the Stedmans' recent denial. Clara listened without interruption. "You're saying she lied," Clara said finally. "I'm saying she enforced a rule that contradicts federal law." Wednesday afternoon, Devin found Robert Nguyen replacing his own air filter, a resident who preferred doing maintenance himself rather than requesting help. Robert was compact, careful, with a hyper-vigilant posture of someone perpetually assessing threats. "Mr. Nguyen, I'm the new maintenance supervisor, Devin Torres." Robert nodded once, precisely. "I know. You helped the Stedmans." "I'm trying to." Devin paused. "Your VA psychiatrist recommended a PTSD service dog 2 years ago. Phyllis denied your request." Robert's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "The nightmares came back. I manage." "You shouldn't have to just manage. Federal law says—" "I know what the law says." Robert's voice was controlled, each word deliberate. "I also know fighting the system costs energy I don't have. What if you weren't fighting alone?" By Thursday evening, 12 residents gathered in Marion and Frank's living room. Clara arrived with homemade pastelitos. Robert came last, standing near the door like he might need to leave quickly. Marion served coffee with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the presence of so many people in her carefully controlled space. But as they shared stories, Eleanor, whose therapy bird was rejected. James, who never requested his late wife's emotional support dog because why fight? Something loosened in her chest. Frank spoke more than he had in months. We document everything, every denial, every medical recommendation, every instance of Phyllis ignoring federal law. Devin leaned forward. I'm thinking bigger. If 12 of us file accommodation requests simultaneously, properly documented, citing federal law, she can't quietly deny everyone. She'll have to respond publicly. Clara's eyes gleamed. Make her show her hand. Robert spoke from the doorway, his voice quiet but carrying weight. Count me in. Friday morning, Devin arrived at the Stedman's condo with a box from Office Depot and a plan that felt simultaneously audacious and necessary. We need more people, he said, unpacking a ream of paper. If 12 of us file accommodation requests simultaneously, Phyllis can't quietly deny everyone. She'll have to respond publicly. Marion's hands trembled as she accepted the draft flyer Devin had created. Simple, clear, one page explaining fair housing rights in language that didn't require a law degree. I can't deliver these door to door. I can barely leave our condo. You don't have to. Clara appeared in the doorway, letting herself in with the confidence of someone who decided they belonged. I walk, I talk, I know half the building already. She studied the flyer. This is good. Simple. People understand simple. Over the weekend, the resistance became a campaign. Devin photocopied 100 flyers at the library, 25 cents per page, money well spent. Marion, finding unexpected purpose, began working through the building directory, calling residents, explaining rights they didn't know they had, documenting who might need accommodations. Her organizational skills, dormant since her medical office management days, resurfaced like muscle memory. She created a spreadsheet tracking potential claimants, their medical conditions, their documentation status. Each completed row felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Clara delivered flyers with the determination of someone who'd spent a lifetime fighting systems designed to exclude her. She knocked on doors, spoke in English and Spanish, refused to be dismissed. By Sunday afternoon, she'd personally contacted 32 residents. Robert, who hadn't advocated for himself in years, called the VA on Saturday morning. His psychiatrist, Dr. Morrison, had been recommending a service dog for 3 years. I thought I didn't deserve help, Robert told Frank quietly. Thought the nightmares were penance. He paused. But maybe that's exactly the thinking that keeps us isolated. By Sunday evening, 18 residents had gathered medical documentation. Marion coordinated the effort from her dining table, making follow-up calls, ensuring paperwork was complete, citing the correct federal statutes. Monday morning at 9 a.m., they assembled outside the HOA office. 12 residents with accommodation requests, each properly documented, each citing federal law. Marion and Frank, Clara and Robert, Eleanor with her therapy bird documentation, James requesting his late wife's emotional support dog, 8 others who'd lived in silent suffering, waiting for someone to show them the door wasn't locked. Donna accepted the requests without expression, her professional mask firmly in place. But Marion noticed her hands shake slightly as she stamped each form with the official receipt. That afternoon, a notice appeared on every building's bulletin board. Emergency board meeting, Thursday 7 p.m. Proposed amendment to animal restrictions. All residents encouraged to attend. The message was unmistakable. Phyllis wasn't accommodating. She was eliminating the loophole entirely, updating bylaws to explicitly ban all animals, including those required by federal law. Clara read the notice and laughed, bitter and sharp. She's doubling down. Good. Let her show everyone exactly who she is. Marion read it and felt her chest tighten with familiar dread. They'd forced Phyllis's hand, and now she was coming for them all. Tuesday morning, the violation notices began appearing. Crisp, white envelopes slipped under doors like threats delivered by morning newspaper. Marion found theirs at 7 a.m. $50 fine for disturbing community peace through organized disruption. Payment due within 10 days. Her hands shook so badly, Frank had to take the paper from her. Organized disruption, he read aloud. That's what she's calling federal civil rights. By noon, Clara had been fined for posting unauthorized materials. The fair housing explainers that explained rights Phyllis preferred residents not know. Robert received a notice for intimidating staff, despite the fact that he'd stood silently in line, spoken only when necessary, and thanked Donna for processing his request. By Wednesday, 8 of the 12 who'd filed requests had been fined. Phyllis was weaponizing HOA enforcement power, using financial punishment to crush resistance before Thursday's meeting. Marion stopped eating. Sleep became impossible. Every sound at their door made her flinch, anticipating another penalty, another punishment for daring to want something. Frank tried to calm her, but his own hands shook worse with stress, betraying his steady words. Wednesday evening, Devin brought dinner, soup and sandwiches from Panera, easy to eat, easier to digest. He found them mid-argument, Marion's voice high and thin with panic. We withdraw. We tell Phyllis we're withdrawing everything. The request, the complaint, all of it. No. Frank's tone was immovable. This isn't just about us anymore. Clara's being threatened with institutionalization. Robert can't afford these fines. We don't surrender. I can't. Marion's breathing accelerated, rapid and shallow. I can't lose again. I can't fight and lose, and her chest constricted. The room tilted. She clutched at Frank's arm, at the recliner, at anything solid, while her body betrayed her with the physical manifestation of 3 years of accumulated grief and terror. Frank's hands shook as he dialed 911. My wife. She's having trouble breathing. Chest pain. At the ER, doctors stabilized her with oxygen and Ativan. Anxiety attack, not cardiac. But Marion, in the hospital bed with monitors beeping and fluorescent lights buzzing, whispered the truth Frank had been dreading. I can't fight, Phyllis. I can't survive losing this too. Frank sat in the waiting room at 2 a.m., alone except for a janitor mopping floors. He thought about Miguel, about Devin's description of fighting insurance companies while watching someone he loved die, about how sometimes protecting people meant letting them rest, and sometimes it meant showing them they were stronger than they believed. He pulled out his phone and began reading texts. Clara. Daughter called. Says if I don't stop causing trouble, she'll move me to a facility with proper supervision. Robert. Fines now. $200. Might have to withdraw request. Eleanor. Can't afford penalties. Withdrawing accommodation request tomorrow. Frank looked at Marion's empty chair, thought about her trembling hands and defeated expression, and made a decision that terrified him as much as it clarified everything. Tomorrow, he was going to that meeting, with or without Marion, and he was going to stand. Frank drove home from the hospital at dawn, hands tremoring against the steering wheel, his first time driving in 14 months. The empty passenger seat felt accusatory. Marion was being kept for observation, her chest still tight, her breathing monitored. She'd whispered before he left, "Don't go to the meeting, please." He'd kissed her forehead without promising anything. At 7 a.m., Devin knocked. Frank answered before the sound finished echoing, grateful not to be alone with his thoughts. Devin carried coffee and the careful expression of someone preparing to deliver bad news gently. "We can postpone," Devin said. "Withdraw the requests. Stop pushing." "No." Frank's voice was steady despite his shaking hands. "Sit down." They sat at the dining table where Marion usually organized everything, her absence of physical weight. Frank's phone lay between them, screen illuminated with text messages that had arrived through the night. "Clara. Daughter called. Says if I don't stop causing trouble, she'll move me to a facility where I can be properly supervised. I'm 82. Not a child. Robert. Fines now $200. Can't afford more. Might have to withdraw. Eleanor. I'm sorry. My fixed income can't handle these penalties. Withdrawing my request today." Frank looked up from the phone. "Marion thinks she's too weak for this fight, that she'll break if we lose." He picked up the photograph from the table. Marion at 30, laughing, holding infant David. "But she survived losing our son. She survived our children leaving. She's surviving right now in that hospital bed, hooked to monitors because her body physically manifested 3 years of accumulated grief. Frank, I'm going to that meeting tonight." Frank's jaw set, the same expression Devin had seen when Frank forced himself to shower alone, to dress himself, to maintain dignity despite tremoring hands. "And I'm going to stand up, and she's going to see, from that hospital bed if necessary, that we don't break, that wanting something doesn't make us weak." Devin studied the older man across the table. "What do you need?" They spent the day preparing. Devin printed federal guidelines, HUD regulations, fair housing case law. Frank rehearsed reading aloud, practicing until his voice didn't shake even when his hands did. At noon, Clara arrived with copies of threatening texts from her daughter. At 2, Robert brought his VA psychiatrist's updated letter, linking his PTSD nightmares directly to the absence of his service dog. At 6:30 p.m., Frank put on his best suit, the one he'd worn to David's funeral, to Stephanie's wedding, to every occasion that required him to stand as witness. His hands fumbled with the tie. Devin tied it without asking. "Ready?" Devin asked. Frank looked at the empty chair where Marion usually sat. "She told me not to fight. But sometimes protecting the people you love means showing them they're stronger than they believe." They drove to the community center in silence. 40 residents filled the room. Phyllis sat at the head table with 4 board members and the HOA attorney, Michael Brennan. Frank walked to the front row, papers trembling in his hands, and waited. Phyllis Kemper called the meeting to order at precisely 7 p.m., her voice carrying the authority of 15 unchallenged years. She sat at the head table flanked by 4 board members and attorney Michael Brennan, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Tonight's agenda concerns a necessary bylaw amendment," Phyllis announced, distributing printed copies, "to clarify our long-standing pet policy and close loopholes that threaten community standards." Marion watched from her hospital bed via Frank's phone, propped on Devin's lap in the front row. Her breathing was shallow, monitored, but her eyes were fixed on the screen. Phyllis read the proposed amendment aloud. "No animals of any kind shall be permitted on property, including but not limited to service animals, emotional support animals, or any creature requiring accommodation under federal, state, or local law." The language was designed to be absolute, unambiguous, final. "This protects property values," Phyllis continued, "and prevents exploitation of accommodation loopholes by residents seeking to circumvent established rules." She paused, scanning the room with the confidence of someone accustomed to compliance. "Questions?" Frank stood, papers trembling in his hands. He didn't preamble, didn't plead. He simply began reading, clearly, methodically, from the Fair Housing Act of 1988. It shall be unlawful to discriminate in the sale or rental of, or to otherwise make unavailable or deny, a dwelling to any buyer or renter because of a handicap. His voice remained steady despite his shaking hands. Discrimination includes a refusal to make reasonable accommodations in rules, policies, practices, or services when such accommodations may be necessary to afford such person equal opportunity to use and enjoy a dwelling. Phyllis interrupted. Mr. Stedman, this isn't... Frank continued reading. HUD Guidance on Assistance Animals. The definition of reasonable accommodation. Legal precedents where HOAs lost discrimination lawsuits. Case numbers. Penalty amounts. Federal monitoring requirements. Clara stood, holding her phone. My daughter texted me last night. Her voice cracked but didn't break. If you don't stop causing trouble, I'll move you somewhere with proper supervision. That's what happens when we ask for help. We get threatened. Robert rose next, unfolding his VA psychiatrist's letter. Patients' PTSD symptoms, including severe nightmares and hypervigilance, correlate directly with the absence of his recommended service animal. He looked at Phyllis. I served 2 tours. Came home and spent 30 years working, paying taxes, following rules. This one rule is killing me. 12 residents stood. 12 testimonies. Not angry, factual. Documentation held like shields. Phyllis tried interrupting twice. Frank's Navy training held. He maintained formation, continued mission. Attorney Brennan leaned toward Phyllis, whispering urgently. The microphone caught it anyway. You cannot legally do this. The room went silent. 40 residents heard their HOA attorney, hired to defend the board, advise against the very amendment he'd been brought to approve. Brennan's professional distance cracked, visibly. He'd read the documentation Frank provided. He knew exactly how this lawsuit would end. Michael Brennan cleared his throat, addressing the board directly. I need to state for the record that passing this amendment invites immediate federal litigation the association cannot win. Patricia Chen, who'd served on the board for 6 years without challenging Phyllis, leaned forward. Explain. The Fair Housing Act requires reasonable accommodations for disabilities. These residents, Brennan gestured toward Frank, Clara, Robert, have legitimate medical documentation. Denying accommodations isn't discretionary. It's discrimination. Penalties include compensatory damages, plaintiff legal fees, and potentially years of federal monitoring. We're protecting property values, Phyllis insisted, her control slipping. One dog becomes dozens. Standards erode. The standards I see, Patricia interrupted, are seniors being fined for needing help. She turned to Donna. How many accommodation requests has this board denied? Donna's voice was quiet but clear. 23 in 15 years. The number landed like a physical blow. Board members exchanged glances. Residents murmured. 23 people suffered alone, Patricia continued, because we prioritized rules over compassion. I move to table this amendment indefinitely and approve all pending accommodation requests within federal guidelines. Second, another board member said immediately. Phyllis's face flushed. I call for a vote on the original amendment. The vote was swift, definitive. 2 board members voted with Phyllis, loyalists to the end. 2 abstained, suddenly concerned about liability. Patricia voted no. 3-2. The amendment failed. Phyllis stood abruptly, gathering papers with shaking hands. All accommodation requests are tabled pending further legal review. She adjourned without allowing discussion. As residents filed out, several approached Frank. An elderly woman touched his arm. "Thank you." A middle-aged man shook his hand. "My mother needs a therapy cat. I didn't know we could fight." Donna waited until Phyllis left, then approached Frank with a flash drive. Every denied accommodation request, 15 years, I kept copies. Outside, Frank called Marion's hospital room. His voice was steady, exhausted, relieved. "We didn't win yet, but we didn't lose, and we're not alone." Marion's response came through tears. "I watched everything. You were so strong." "We were strong," Frank corrected. "You survived losing David. You survived the kids leaving. You survived tonight in that hospital bed. That's strength." Devin drove Frank home at 9 p.m. Clara called at 9:30. Her daughter had texted an apology, asking when to bring Dulce back. Robert texted at 10. His VA caseworker had expedited his service dog application after hearing about the meeting. Frank sat in their quiet condo, Marion's empty chair beside him, and felt something shift, not victory. That would come later. But possibility. The recognition that they'd stopped disappearing. Friday morning, Donna Mitchell waited in a coffee shop 2 miles from Whispering Pines, a manila envelope resting on the table like evidence at a trial. When Devin, Frank, and Clara arrived, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Phyllis ordered me to shred these last year." Donna's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. "I couldn't. 23 accommodation requests over 15 years. All denied." Frank spread the documents across the table, his insurance adjuster training immediately recognizing patterns. Mrs. Kowalski denied despite severe arthritis and a physician's recommendation for a therapy cat. Mr. Rahman rejected after submitting psychiatric documentation for an emotional support bird. The Martinez family turned away when their autistic grandson needed a service dog during visits. "Some of these have stronger medical documentation than ours," Clara said, reading over Frank's shoulder. "She rejected people who followed every rule perfectly." Donna nodded. She wasn't evaluating merit. She was enforcing absolute control. Devin photographed each document, then called Sandra Williams, the HUD investigator assigned to Marion and Frank's original complaint. "We have evidence of systemic discrimination. 23 denials, pattern of retaliation. Can you come today?" By Monday morning, Sandra sat in the Whispering Pines Community Center, interviewing residents, while Donna's documentation transformed individual complaints into prosecutable discrimination. Clara testified about her daughter's threats. Robert described 3 years of untreated PTSD symptoms. Eleanor explained how the denial of her therapy bird contributed to her husband's depression before he died. Marion, released from the hospital Sunday, participated by phone. Her voice was thin but steady. "I thought I was weak for needing help." Phyllis convinced an entire community that asking for accommodation was character failure. That's not administration. That's cruelty disguised as policy. Sandra listened, took notes, asked precise questions. After 6 hours of interviews, she closed her laptop with finality. Investigations typically take months. This case shows egregious and systemic violations. I'll recommend immediate federal intervention. That afternoon, HUD's formal notice arrived at Whispering Pines. All accommodation requests must be processed within 10 days. According to federal guidelines, all retaliatory fines rescinded with written apologies. And the HOA must submit to federal compliance monitoring for 3 years. The attorney advised immediate compliance. The board, minus Phyllis, voted unanimously to accept all terms. Phyllis submitted her resignation Wednesday afternoon, terse, professional, containing no admission of wrongdoing, just sudden retirement for personal reasons. Patricia Chen assumed the presidency Thursday morning. her first official act, approving all 12 pending accommodation requests. Her second, establishing a residence rights committee to review all future accommodation requests, with Clara, Robert, and Marion as founding members. Friday afternoon, Marion sat in their condo with Biscuit's adoption paperwork, her hands steady for the first time in weeks. "We did it," she whispered. Frank squeezed her shoulder. "You did it. You testified from a hospital bed. That took more courage than anything I said at that meeting." Marion looked at her husband, then at the adoption papers. "I want to bring him home Thursday. Is that too soon?" "No," Frank said. "It's exactly right." 3 weeks later, on a Thursday morning brilliant with Florida sunshine, Marion and Frank drove to Peaceful Paws Rescue, where a 7-pound Havanese named Biscuit waited in a kennel, unaware his life was about to change completely. The rescue coordinator, Amanda, brought him out. Butterscotch fur, liquid brown eyes, tail wagging with desperate hope. He's 3 years old, surrendered when his previous owner moved to assisted living. He's trained for anxiety support, excellent with seniors, and he loves absolutely everyone. Marion knelt, ignoring her protesting knees. Biscuit approached cautiously, sniffed her extended hand, then pressed his small body against her leg. Something in Marion's chest, locked tight for 3 years, cracked open. She picked him up. He fit perfectly in her arms, warm and solid and real. When he licked her chin, Marion laughed, a sound Frank hadn't heard since David's funeral, genuine and surprised and alive. "We'll take him," Marion whispered. During the drive home, Marion held Biscuit's carrier in her lap, unable to stop touching him through the mesh door. At every red light, Frank reached over to stroke the dog's soft ears. At their condo, Marion set the carrier down and opened the door. Biscuit emerged cautiously, exploring each room with his nose, mapping his new territory. When he returned to the living room, he jumped onto Marion's lap without hesitation, circled twice, and settled with his head on her knee. Marion's tears fell silently into his fur. Frank sat beside them, his tremoring hand resting on Marion's shoulder. That afternoon, Clara knocked with Dulce, a gray tabby cat, now 10 years old, returned by her daughter with mumbled apologies Clara hadn't bothered listening to. "Want to introduce them?" Biscuit and Dulce regarded each other with mutual indifference, then ignored each other completely. The perfect outcome. Friday, Robert's German Shepherd Major arrived through VA Resources, a massive, gentle presence trained to wake Robert from nightmares and provide deep pressure therapy during panic attacks. Saturday morning, Marion attempted their first walk around the artificial lake. She was terrified of judgment, of Phyllis's lingering supporters, of being seen as someone who'd caused trouble. "We're walking," Frank said firmly, clipping Biscuit's leash. They encountered Clara immediately, pushing Dulce in a pet stroller. Then Robert with Major, the dog's calm presence radiating security. Eleanor with her cockatiel in a carrier. James with his late wife's cocker spaniel, finally retrieved from his sister's house. 8 residents with newly arrived animals, walking together in morning sunlight. A slow parade of healing, each step reclaiming space they'd been told they didn't deserve. Marion looked down at Biscuit, trotting confidently beside her, then at the community surrounding them. She was no longer disappearing. She was becoming visible again. 3 weeks after Biscuit's arrival, Devin knocked on the community center door at 6 a.m. Wednesday, carrying folding chairs and a commercial coffee maker borrowed from the maintenance office. By 7:30, he'd arranged seating in a circle, brewed 2 pots, and set out the pastries Clara had insisted on providing. At 8 a.m., the first residents arrived. then more. By 8:15, 30 people filled the space, some with therapy animals, some without, all seeking connection they'd forgotten was possible. Devin called it Community Care Coffee Hour. No agenda, no formality, just space to gather, share resources, and remember they weren't disappearing. Marion arrived with biscuit and a clipboard, her organizational skills resurfacing like muscle memory. "I'm coordinating a pet care network," she announced, voice still soft but carrying new authority. "Anyone who needs temporary help with their animal, vet appointments, emergency care, daily walks. We're building a volunteer list." 12 people signed up immediately. Marion's hands trembled slightly as she wrote names. But the trembling felt different now, anticipation rather than fear. Frank led a corner discussion on residents' rights, explaining fair housing protections, HOA limitations, complaint procedures. Robert sat beside him, occasionally adding veteran-specific resources. The two men had become friends through shared understanding. Military service, bodies that failed them, the choice to fight anyway. Clara taught basic Spanish phrases to anyone interested. Her living room transformed from isolated cell to cultural exchange. Her great-nephew, visiting from Orlando, sat beside her, translating when her English faltered, visibly proud of his grandmother's new prominence. Patricia Chen attended weekly, ensuring board decisions reflected resident input rather than administrative convenience. Under her leadership, Whispering Pines was becoming what it should have been, a community rather than a collection of enforced rules. At 9:30, Marion's tablet chimed. Stephanie's face appeared on screen, video call, not text. "Mom, I saw the news story. Can we talk?" Marion stepped outside, biscuit cradled in her arms. The Florida morning was humid and bright. Behind her, the community center hummed with conversation. "Hi, sweetheart." Marion's voice was steady. Stephanie spoke, quickly, apologizing, explaining, justifying. Marion listened without interrupting, watching Biscuit's ears twitch at passing birds. When Stephanie finished, Marion spoke quietly but firmly. "I'd like that. Reconnecting. But I'm okay now, Stephanie. We built our own family here. People who show up." She didn't say it cruelly, just truthfully. The distinction mattered. Stephanie's face showed surprise, then something like relief. "I understand. Can I call Sunday? Maybe video chat with Dad?" "Yes," Marion smiled. "We'd like that." She ended the call and returned inside. Frank was teaching Clara's great-nephew chess. Devin helped Robert plan a service dog training demonstration for interested residents. Eleanor's cockatiel chirped from its carrier, answered by Major's contented sigh. Marion sat down, Biscuit settling on her lap with the confidence of someone who knew he belonged. She looked around the room, at Clara laughing, at Frank concentrating on chess strategy, at Devin moving quietly between conversations, facilitating connection. She was surrounded by noise and life and purpose. She wasn't waiting to be saved anymore. She'd saved herself. They'd saved each other.